When 11-year-old Maya Rodriguez was kicked off Flight 2847, everyone assumed she was trouble. 3 hours later, when the captain collapsed and hydraulics failed, the desperate pilot screamed one word over the radio, "Falcon." That's when they realized the girl they removed was the only one who could save them all. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Maya Rodriguez stood at gate 42, holding her boarding pass with shaking hands. The gate agent looked at her computer screen and frowned. "Miss, I need you to step aside right now," Patricia Williams said loudly. Her voice made everyone in the waiting area turn and stare. Maya felt her face get hot. She was 11 years old, traveling alone to see her grandmother in Seattle. She had done this trip 6 times before without any problems. "There's an issue with your ticket," Patricia continued, typing fast on her keyboard. "You're listed as an unaccompanied minor, but I don't see the proper paperwork in our system." "My grandmother filed everything 3 weeks ago," Maya said quietly. "I have confirmation emails in my bag." Patricia held up her hand to stop Maya from talking. "I understand you think everything was handled correctly, but our system shows something different. We have strict rules about unaccompanied minors. I can't let you board this flight." Behind Maya, passengers started whispering to each other. "Can you believe parents would send their kid without proper paperwork?" a man in a business suit said to his friend. "Some people don't know how to fill out basic forms," a woman with a designer purse added. "That poor gate agent has to deal with this mess." Patricia called over her shoulder. "Stephen, I need security at gate 42. We have an unaccompanied minor who needs to be removed." 2 security officers arrived within minutes. The younger one looked uncomfortable but said, "Miss, please gather your things and come with us." Maya picked up her small backpack. She wanted to cry, but her father had taught her to stay calm in difficult situations. Her father, Major Carlos "Falcon" Rodriguez, had been an Air Force fighter pilot. He died in combat when Maya was 9 years old. As Maya walked away from the gate, more passengers whispered about her. "Probably a runaway," someone said. "You can tell by how nervous she looks," another person agreed. The security officers took Maya to a small office near the gate. The older officer, Ronald Martinez, tried to be kind. "Look, kid, the airline has rules to protect you. If the paperwork isn't in the system, we can't let you on that plane. It's not personal." "My grandmother filed everything correctly," Maya said, her voice steady. "I have confirmation emails with reference numbers. This is my 7th time flying this route. Someone made a mistake in your computer system. Instead of checking, that gate agent decided to remove me." Ronald looked surprised. Most 11-year-olds would be crying by now. This girl spoke like an adult. "I understand your frustration," he said. "But until we verify everything, I can't let you go back to that plane. The flight leaves in 40 minutes. Honestly, we probably won't fix this in time." At the gate, boarding continued without Maya. Patricia made an announcement that the issue was resolved, as if removing an 11-year-old was good problem solving. Flight 2847 was a Boeing 737 going to Seattle. Today it carried 175 passengers, business travelers, families, and regular people flying on a normal afternoon. In the cockpit, Captain Richard Hayes completed his pre-flight checklist. He had been flying for 32 years. His first officer, Jessica Chen, had 12 years of experience. Together, they were an experienced flight crew. Neither pilot knew that the passenger list contained a special name. Maya Rodriguez was the daughter of the legendary Major Carlos "Falcon" Rodriguez. Maya herself had earned the honorary use of that same call sign 2 years earlier. At 9 years old, Maya was diagnosed with leukemia, a serious cancer. She spent 18 months getting chemotherapy at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. The treatment was brutal, but Maya never gave up. Fighter pilots recovering at the hospital started calling her Little Falcon after they learned whose daughter she was. Then they just called her Falcon when they realized she earned the name on her own. Maya attended every aviation lecture the hospital offered. She learned from the pilots during their recovery. She studied flight manuals and emergency procedures with intense focus. The Air Force Thunderbirds visited her once and were so impressed they officially recognized her honorary call sign. None of this information was in the computer systems Patricia Williams checked. None of this context appeared in Ronald Martinez's database. The passengers who judged Maya had no idea who she really was. Flight 2847 pushed back from the gate at 3:47 p.m., 12 minutes late because of Maya's removal. The plane taxied toward the runway. Captain Hayes and First Officer Chen completed their checklist and prepared for a normal flight. The plane climbed through the clouds. Everything seemed routine. In the passenger cabin, flight attendants demonstrated safety procedures that nobody watched. People scrolled their phones and settled in for the flight. Maya sat in the security office, watching the clock. Ronald had left to coordinate with the airline's passenger services department. Through the small window, she could see other flights taking off normally. Flight 2847 reached 37,000 feet and leveled off. The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers relaxed into their seats. Then, 33 minutes into the flight, Captain Richard Hayes felt sudden, terrible pain behind his left eye. The pain got worse fast. Within 15 seconds, he was gasping. His hands trembled. He tried to speak but couldn't. First Officer Chen looked over and saw her captain's face twisted in pain. His hands were shaking. He was struggling to stay conscious. Richard. Richard, talk to me. Jessica said, panic rising in her voice. Captain Hayes tried to respond but only groaned. Then his body went stiff and he slumped forward, unconscious. Jessica pressed the button to call the senior flight attendant while transmitting on the emergency frequency. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Denver Center, Southwest 2847. Captain is incapacitated. Requesting immediate emergency assistance. The head flight attendant, Margaret Sullivan, entered the cockpit and immediately saw the crisis. Captain Hayes was completely unconscious. His breathing was shallow. His skin looked gray. Margaret had seen medical emergencies before. This looked like a massive stroke. I need someone with medical training immediately, Margaret announced over the speaker system. If there are any doctors, nurses, or paramedics on board, please identify yourselves right now. 3 passengers came forward, a pediatric nurse, an emergency room doctor, and a retired paramedic. They rushed to the cockpit and began assessing Captain Hayes. Jessica Chen was now the only functioning pilot on a plane carrying 247 people at 520 miles per hour. She forced herself to stay calm and focus on immediate tasks. She checked that the autopilot was working, confirmed their fuel status, and began processing emergency procedures. Denver Air Traffic Control cleared all other planes from their path and began coordinating emergency response at the nearest airport. Then, 47 seconds after Jessica's Mayday call, the plane's warning system lit up. The screen showed hydraulic pressure loss on system number 1. Before she could diagnose that problem, system number 2 failed. 30 seconds later, system number 3 failed too. Jessica was staring at every pilot's nightmare, complete hydraulic system failure. This meant she had lost normal control over the plane. Denver Center, Southwest 2847. We now have complete hydraulic failure on all 3 systems. I'm losing flight control authority. This situation has gone beyond single pilot capability, Jessica transmitted, her voice shaking. A complete hydraulic failure on a Boeing 737 meant the pilot had lost control over the ailerons, elevators, rudder, flaps, and landing gear. Only minimal trim controls remained as ways to control the plane. The emergency room doctor looked up from Captain Hayes. This man has suffered a massive stroke. His pupils aren't responding. His breathing is failing. Without immediate brain surgery, he won't survive the next 30 minutes. Even if we land right now, I don't think he'll make it. Margaret realized Jessica was facing an impossible situation alone. She made an executive decision. I'm going to check the passenger list to see if anyone on board has aviation experience who might help you. I know it's not normal procedure, but we're way beyond normal procedure now. She pulled up the electronic passenger list and began scanning for anyone with military service or aviation background. That's when Margaret's eyes stopped moving. She stared at one name. The database showed, Rodriguez, Maya. Minor. Military dependent. Special notation, honorary USAF call sign, Falcon. Daughter of Major Carlos Rodriguez, Kia. Aviation knowledge certified. Margaret's breath caught. She remembered the news coverage from 2 years ago about the little girl battling cancer who became an inspiration at Walter Reed. She remembered the Air Force Thunderbird ceremony that gave her the same call sign her fighter pilot father had carried. "Oh my God," Margaret whispered. They had removed from this plane the one passenger whose knowledge might save everyone's life. Margaret grabbed the phone to the cockpit. There was a passenger removed at boarding. An 11-year-old girl named Maya Rodriguez who carries the honorary Air Force call sign, Falcon. She has extensive aviation knowledge from her military family and her time at Walter Reed with combat pilots. According to this notation, she's been certified by Air Force personnel as having advanced understanding of emergency procedures. She might be able to help you. Jessica's mind raced. She'd heard stories about Falcon Rodriguez through the pilot community. She knew the legend of the girl who earned her call sign through courage that amazed grown men. The alternative was managing this emergency completely alone. Contact the gate. Contact airport operations. Contact whoever you need and get Falcon back to this aircraft immediately, Jessica commanded. I don't care what it takes. That girl needs to be on the radio with me right now. Back at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, Maya had been watching the flight tracking on her phone. Suddenly the aircraft symbol changed from green to orange and the status updated to medical emergency. Every instinct her father had taught her started screaming that something was terribly wrong with the plane she should have been on. Ronald Martinez burst through the office door, his radio crackling with urgent messages. His face was flushed with panic. Maya Rodriguez, listen very carefully, Ronald said, his voice cracking. Flight 2847 has declared an emergency. The captain has had a massive stroke and the plane has suffered complete hydraulic failure. The first officer has minimal control. The flight attendant found notations about your aviation knowledge in the passenger list. The pilot has specifically requested that you be connected to the cockpit immediately to help with emergency procedures. Maya's shock lasted about 3 seconds. Then her training took over. She was moving toward the door with focused intensity. They ran through the terminal. Ronald cleared a path through crowds while speaking into his radio. Patricia Williams stood in the operations center looking like she was going to be sick. She realized her impatience had almost caused a disaster. Get her on that radio immediately, the airport operations director commanded. Maya took a headset from a shaking technician and pressed the button with a steady hand. Southwest 2847, this is Falcon. First Officer Chen, I'm on the ground at DFW and I'm here to help you get that plane safely down. The sound of Maya's voice in Jessica's headset, calm and professional, hit the pilot with powerful relief. Falcon, Southwest 2847. Thank God you're there. I have complete hydraulic failure on all 3 systems. Minimal flight control through rudder and stabilizer trim only. I'm alone in this cockpit with 247 people depending on me. I need you to help me think through options I might be missing. Maya's mind immediately began processing the scenario through everything her father had taught her and everything she'd learned from pilots at Walter Reed. First Officer Chen, you're going to get through this and everyone on that plane is going to survive. But we need to work together and be smarter than this emergency. Tell me your current altitude, airspeed, fuel status, and whether both engines are working normally. Then describe exactly what flight control responses you're getting from the rudder trim and stabilizer trim. For the next 47 minutes, while Flight 2847 descended toward Denver International Airport, Maya coordinated an emergency response that used every bit of knowledge she'd gained. She walked Jessica through differential thrust techniques that used unequal engine power to help turn the plane. She talked her through airspeed management strategies. She helped calculate the exact descent path that would give them the best chance of reaching the runway. Air traffic controllers at Denver cleared every plane from the airspace around Flight 2847. They extended the runway to maximum length and coordinated every fire truck, ambulance, and rescue unit in Denver. Maya contacted retired Air Force pilots who'd experienced similar emergencies and connected them into the coordination network. She built a team of expertise that surrounded Jessica with knowledge no single pilot could have. She calculated landing speeds and touchdown targets. She helped coordinate cabin preparation for a potentially rough landing. She maintained constant communication with Jessica to prevent the isolation and panic that could overwhelm even experienced pilots. Falcon, I'm 3 miles from the runway, descending through 400 feet, and I have almost no ability to flare for landing, Jessica transmitted, her voice tight with concentration. I'm going to have one chance to get this right. Maya's voice came back instantly, steady as a rock. First Officer Chen, you're going to touch down at 167 knots, approximately 1,200 feet past the threshold. You're going to survive this landing because you're one of the most capable pilots I've ever worked with, and because 247 people are counting on you. Trust your training. Trust your calculations. Now fly that plane onto the runway and show everyone why you earned those wings. Flight 2847 crossed the runway threshold at Denver International Airport. Jessica's hands were locked on the controls, her feet working the rudder pedals with tiny, precise movements to stay aligned with the centerline. The Boeing 737 touched down hard, exactly 1,247 feet past the threshold. The landing gear absorbed an impact harder than normal but still within limits. The plane bounced once, settled back onto the runway, and Jessica deployed the thrust reversers while using differential braking and rudder to maintain control. As the plane slowed from 167 knots to a full stop, emergency vehicles swarmed around it. Firefighters took positions. Paramedics rushed aboard to treat Captain Hayes and evacuate passengers down emergency slides. Every single passenger and crew member walked away from that plane alive. Some had minor injuries from the hard landing and evacuation, but everyone was breathing and safe. Jessica Chen sat in the cockpit for 5 full minutes after shutdown, her hands shaking as the weight of what just happened hit her. She keyed the radio one final time. Falcon, this is Southwest 2847. We're down safe. Everyone made it. I could not have done this without you. You need to understand that 247 people are alive right now because an 11-year-old had more courage and knowledge than most adults will ever have. Thank you doesn't even begin to cover what I owe you. Maya sat in the operations center at DFW, surrounded by airport personnel and airline officials staring at her like she'd performed a miracle. Patricia Williams stood in the corner with tears running down her face. The full weight of her terrible judgment was crushing her. She realized she'd nearly killed 247 people through impatience and assumptions. She approached Maya with trembling steps. Maya, I am so deeply sorry for what I did at that gate. I made assumptions based on your age. I didn't take time to verify your paperwork properly. My impatience almost caused a disaster that would have killed hundreds of people. I have no excuse. Maya looked at the woman who had humiliated her and removed her from a flight she had every right to board. She made a decision her father would have been proud of. Mrs. Williams, I accept your apology. What happened at the gate was wrong and it hurt me, and it almost had terrible consequences. But you're a human being who made a mistake under pressure. I hope you'll learn from this and maybe take an extra minute next time to verify information before making assumptions about what people can do based on their age or appearance. The airline's crisis management team arrived within hours. By the next morning, Maya Rodriguez was a national news story. Footage of an 11-year-old girl coordinating an emergency landing from an airport operations center became the defining image. The adults who had removed her from the flight watched in stunned recognition. Aviation experts appeared on television to explain how Maya's knowledge and composure had saved 247 lives. Her understanding of emergency procedures exceeded many professional pilots. The combination of her military family background and her time learning from wounded pilots at Walter Reed had created someone whose abilities defied every assumption adults make about children. The passengers from Flight 2847 who had whispered judgments about Maya while she was being removed now watched those news reports with crushing shame. They recognized themselves making assumptions and criticisms about a child who turned out to be far more capable than any of them. Many contacted the airline requesting Maya's information so they could write personal apologies. Captain Richard Hayes survived his massive stroke through immediate medical intervention and extraordinary luck, though he would never fly again professionally. When he was well enough to understand what happened, hospital staff told him about the 11-year-old who helped save his plane after his brain failed him. He wept openly as he tried to find words to thank someone who prevented his medical emergency from becoming a mass disaster. The Federal Aviation Administration launched a comprehensive investigation into the Flight 2847 incident. Investigators interviewed Maya extensively. Senior FAA officials found themselves taking notes as an 11-year-old walked them through her decision-making process. The FAA's final report included specific recommendations for improving pilot training, emergency coordination procedures, and integration of ground-based expertise into airborne crisis management. The report cited Maya's performance as the standard professional aviators should aspire to achieve. Jessica Chen visited Maya 2 months after the emergency. She brought a custom leather flight bag with both their call signs embroidered on opposite sides with a simple inscription between them: "Together, we flew through fire and brought everyone home." Jessica explained that she wanted Maya to know their partnership in that crisis had created a bond stronger than normal friendship. She would never forget the voice that guided her through the worst moment of her career. Maya kept that flight bag on the same shelf where her father's medals documented a different kind of service. Sometimes late at night, she would look at it and think about the strange path that took her from a cancer patient at Walter Reed to the girl who saved 247 lives because wounded warriors had respected her enough to teach her everything they knew. She thought about Patricia Williams, who removed her from that plane, and Jessica Chen, who trusted her to help save it, and her father, who gave her both the knowledge and the character that circumstances required her to use. The real lesson of Flight 2847 wasn't just about aviation or emergencies or the specific abilities Maya demonstrated in crisis. The real lesson was that respect and competence and courage don't arrive according to anyone's schedule or expectations. They emerge when dedication meets circumstances and preparation meets necessity. Maya had saved 247 lives, not because she was exceptional or blessed with abilities beyond normal human capacity, but because people at Walter Reed had respected her enough to teach her everything they knew. And because when crisis demanded it, she'd been ready to use that knowledge regardless of whether anyone thought an 11-year-old should possess it. Every time someone somewhere chose to verify information before making assumptions, chose to respect capability regardless of its source, chose to recognize that age doesn't determine worth and experience doesn't control wisdom, they honored the legacy of the 11-year-old who was kicked off a plane and then called back to save everyone aboard. Because she'd earned the right to carry her father's call sign and the responsibility to use everything it represented. Maya Rodriguez walked through the gates of the Air Force Academy, her acceptance letter still fresh in her mind. At 14 years old, she was the youngest person ever admitted to the prestigious institution's early entry program. The story of Flight 2847 had opened doors she never imagined possible. But Maya knew the truth. The doors opened not because of one dramatic day, but because of years of preparation, study, and dedication. The emergency had simply revealed what was already there. She received letters every month from passengers who had been on Flight 2847. Some were simple thank you notes. Others were longer, more personal reflections on how that day had changed their perspectives on life, on judgment, on what it means to truly see people for who they are. One letter came from the businessman in the expensive suit who had complained about her at the gate. He wrote about how he'd stopped making snap judgments about people. How he now took time to listen, to understand, to look beyond surface appearances. He'd started a mentorship program at his company specifically for young people, giving them opportunities others said they were too young for. The woman with the designer purse wrote that she'd become an advocate for youth empowerment in her community. She volunteered at schools, teaching kids about aviation and encouraging them to pursue dreams others might say were impossible. Even passengers who hadn't said anything negative that day wrote to say how the incident had affected them. They'd learned that silence in the face of injustice was its own form of participation. They'd learned to speak up when they saw others being judged unfairly. Patricia Williams had resigned from her position at the airline 2 weeks after the incident. But her story didn't end there. She'd gone back to school, studying child psychology and youth development. Now she worked with an organization that trained airline staff on unconscious bias and the importance of proper verification procedures. She'd written to Maya dozens of times, and they'd eventually met for coffee. Patricia had tears in her eyes as she showed Maya the training manual she'd helped develop. "I can't undo what I did that day," Patricia said. "But I can make sure it never happens to another child. Your story is in this manual. It's helping train thousands of airline employees around the world." Ronald Martinez, the security officer, had also reached out. He'd become an instructor for airport security personnel, using the Flight 2847 incident as a case study in the importance of critical thinking and not just blindly following procedures without asking questions. Jessica Chen had become one of Maya's closest friends and mentors. They spoke regularly, and Jessica often visited Maya to talk about aviation, life, and the unique bond they shared. Jessica had been promoted to captain and was now training other pilots. She incorporated lessons from that emergency day into every training session she conducted. "You taught me something important that day," Jessica told Maya during one visit. "You taught me that expertise can come from unexpected places. That knowledge doesn't have an age requirement. That in a crisis, you accept help from anyone who can provide it, regardless of what you expected." Captain Hayes had made a partial recovery from his stroke. Though he couldn't fly anymore, he'd found a new purpose as a speaker on aviation safety and medical awareness for pilots. He talked openly about how Maya had saved not just 247 lives that day, but specifically his life, because without her guidance, the plane might have crashed before he could receive medical care. He visited Maya once, bringing with him his captain's wings from that final flight. "These belong to you now," he said, pinning them carefully to her jacket. "You were the real captain that day. You earned these more than anyone I've ever known." The aviation community had embraced Maya completely. She was invited to speak at conferences, to share her knowledge, to inspire the next generation of pilots. But she remained humble, always crediting her father, the wounded warriors at Walter Reed, and the circumstances that had forced her to use what she'd learned. Airlines around the world had changed their policies because of Flight 2847. New protocols were established for verifying passenger documentation. Training programs were updated to address unconscious bias. Emergency response procedures were enhanced to better integrate ground-based expertise during crises. The Boeing company had even invited Maya to their facility, where she consulted on emergency procedure documentation, helping them write materials that were clearer and more accessible. "If an 11-year-old can understand it," one engineer said, "then pilots under extreme stress definitely can." Maya's grandmother, who had been waiting at Seattle Airport that day, had experienced her own terror when she heard about the emergency. But she'd never doubted her granddaughter. "I knew if anyone could help, it would be you," she'd told Maya. "Your father would be so proud. I am so proud." The story of Flight 2847 became required reading in aviation schools. It was studied in crisis management courses. It was discussed in psychology classes about bias and judgment. It became a touchstone for conversations about age discrimination and the importance of recognizing competence wherever it appears. Maya kept a scrapbook of all the letters, news articles, and photos from that day and its aftermath. But her favorite item was still the flight bag from Jessica, and her father's dog tags, which she wore every day. Sometimes she would visit Walter Reed, walking the same halls where she'd fought cancer and learned about aviation. The wounded warriors who had taught her still served there, many of them now instructors and mentors themselves. They greeted her as one of their own, because she was. "You did us proud, Falcon," they would say. And she knew they meant it. As Maya prepared for her future at the Air Force Academy and beyond, she carried with her the lessons of that day. Not just the technical knowledge that had saved lives, but the deeper truths about human nature, about judgment and redemption, about courage and preparation. She knew that her journey was just beginning. That Flight 2847 wasn't the end of her story, it was the beginning. And whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them the same way she'd faced that emergency, with knowledge, composure, and the unwavering belief that age is just a number, and capability is what truly matters. The call sign, Falcon, wasn't just a name anymore. It was a responsibility. A reminder. A promise. And Maya Rodriguez intended to honor it every single day of her life.